The anti-work movement is radically changing how millions of people look at work. In the 20 years that I've been in this field, I have never seen anything like it. I've been following it closely since 2020, and in this video, I'm going to tell you what it's all about, why it's so influential, and what I like and dislike about it. Because much as I admire it, I also do see some problems. I've also noticed that most people in management or HR have no idea that anti-work even exists. I did a poll of my contacts on LinkedIn, and 85% said they'd never even heard of it. That's a mistake. I'm convinced that no workplace or boss can afford to ignore what's happening among such a huge group of workers. So I also want to talk about how companies should react to anti-work. Let's do this. But first, some facts. What exactly is the anti-work movement? Now, many philosophers and activists have long been skeptical about the very concept of jobs and work. Nietzsche was one of them. And they have constructed some fascinating and comprehensive critiques. But in this video, I want to focus specifically on the anti-work subreddit. That's a forum on Reddit that has become incredibly popular over the last couple of years. In 2019, it had 10,000 subscribers. Right now, it has 2.4 million and is still growing fast. It's highly active. It gets around 400 new posts and 10,000 new comments a day. There are other popular subreddits that have similar themes like work reform, tales from retail, and recruiting hell, but anti-work is the 800-pound gorilla in this space. The name makes it sound like they're against all work, and yes, some of them are, but mostly this community is against bad jobs that exploit workers. Their FAQ says this: we're not against effort, labor, or being productive. We're against jobs as they are structured under capitalism and the state, against exploitative economic relations, and against hierarchical social relations at the workplace. Or here's a more poetic way to say it by a Reddit user in anti-work. Is cooking your dinner work? For me, it isn't. It's just a thing I do and I enjoy doing it. I don't view it as work, even though it requires labor and time. And if I don't do it, I'll eventually die. Even when I cook for friends and family, it still isn't work because it's something I've actively chosen to accomplish and I control how it happens. But cooking in a restaurant is work because it's now a transaction and you don't control your labor anymore. It's alienated from your life and it becomes a tool for someone else to profit off of. That's the key concept that people here want to eliminate. Our labor becoming a tool rather than an extension of our desires. I can definitely get behind that. And who are these millions of people? A demographic survey of 13,000 anti-work members gives us some data on that. First, they're mostly young. 75% are under the age of 35, and only 5% of them are 45 or older. However, these are not unemployed teenagers living in their parents' basements, okay? 65% of them have full-time jobs, and a further 10% have part-time jobs. Around 75% of the members are North American, and most of the posts do seem to be from US workers. You can tell because there are many, many posts about unfair practices around things like tipping or paid time off, which are very much American issues. Why is anti-work mostly American? I can see two possible reasons. One, Reddit users skew heavily American in the first place, and two, many of the fundamental problems that anti-work points out are specific US problems that you just wouldn't see in other countries where workers are protected by stronger labor laws. Here's an example. One complaint I see again and again on anti-work is bosses changing the hours for their shift workers on short notice against their wishes or demanding that they come in on their off days. In many other countries, including right here in Denmark, there are rules around shift workers' schedules, and a boss can't just change someone's hours on short notice or deny them time off. What else do people talk about on anti-work? I went through the posts from the last month and I saw three main themes. A lot of posts call out bad workplaces or bad managers for things like long working hours or abusing employees. Many of these posts are screenshots of text messages or emails from bad bosses making unreasonable demands and employees reacting by saying no, some of them very emphatically. Another very common category of posts is people quitting jobs because they felt mistreated. As you know, I am all in favor of people quitting jobs they don't like. I have a whole 1 hour long video that debunks the anti-quitting propaganda in our society and explains why leaving a bad job is, in fact, awesome. And finally, many posts on anti-work call out various types of management nonsense, bad political takes, or social inequities. So these posts focus not on one workplace specifically, but more on society in general, typically US society. What explains the meteoric rise of anti-work since 2019? Well, I figure COVID has to be a part of it. Anti-work's growth began around the same time as COVID disrupted a lot of our day-to-day routines in life and at work. When life and work chug along as usual, it's easy to let routine and habit lull you to sleep a little bit and just keep doing things the same way as always, even if that way is actually bad for you. The pandemic obviously had a huge effect on most jobs. Some people lost their jobs, many people started working from home, and some had to work in completely new ways. And this break to our routines gave a lot of people a chance to seriously examine their work life. And many of those people did not like what they saw and wanted things to change. We can see this in all the talk about the Great Resignation. That's the unprecedented rise in people quitting their jobs that has happened in the last few years. And again, that is awesome. At the same time, there has been a steady drop in the unemployment rate in many countries after COVID started. It is easier to find a new job now than at pretty much any time since the global financial crisis started in 2008. And when jobs are easier to find, it might make people less accepting of bad jobs. And finally, since anti-work is predominantly American, it's worth noting that worker protections in the US have been systematically hollowed out since the 80s, and these efforts are still ongoing. Many laws and regulations that protect workers have been struck down. Many of the institutions who are supposed to enforce the laws have been defunded or eliminated, and lawmakers and big corporations have worked tirelessly to keep employees from joining unions. I mean, just look at the enormous lengths that companies like Amazon and Starbucks have gone to keep unions out. So I guess what I'm saying is that US workers face worse and worse conditions now and do have more to complain about than in the last many decades. So based on my 20 years of experience in this field, what do I think of anti-work? Well, first of all, it is completely unprecedented. I have never seen anything like it. And that goes both for the actual content and, of course, for how many people have gotten involved. And I love that it's making so many people think critically about work. It calls out a ton of crucial workplace problems around things like working hours, bad bosses, unfair salaries, insane recruitment processes, and so much more. I also like that the movement points the finger squarely at bad bosses and bad workplaces. If things are bad at work, there's no sense in anti-work with that. Well, the world isn't fair, but we'll just have to live with that. On anti-work, you'll never see things like tips on how to work for a difficult boss or how to survive a toxic workplace or why having a tough job is good for you, actually. All of which are real headlines I have seen on LinkedIn recently. Quite the contrary. Anti-work members believe that they're entitled to fair conditions and good treatment at work, and that it's not up to them to adapt to bad workplaces or bad bosses. Absolutely my favorite thing is that anti-work is normalizing saying no at work and quitting jobs we don't like. Society in general has a very strong bias against quitting, but in anti-work, people who stand up to abusive bosses or quit bad jobs are celebrated as heroes. I think that's amazing and something we sorely need. There is nothing wrong with quitting a job simply because you don't like it. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you have a bad character. It means you value yourself enough to not allow a toxic workplace to mistreat you. It means you have the energy and willpower to do something about it instead of just passively accepting whatever they dish out. I am a little sad that it's almost exclusively young people on anti-work. I wish that the older generations would wake up too, but let's face it, they probably won't. A lot of them did face the same mistreatment in their work lives, but they just bought into the whole system, hook, line, and sinker. If anything, many people in the older generations at work worship hard work. You know, they had it tough early in their careers, so why should young people have it any better? The workplace is not a playground. Some of them say, toughen up, buttercup, and do as you're told. That is just a terrible attitude. I also love that anti-work has a strong focus on the political changes we need to create better working conditions. For instance, the movement is pro-union, pro-free education, pro-salary fairness, against discrimination, and for lower working hours. And by the way, these are all conditions that workers have fought for and achieved in many other countries, but less so in America. And while some might hope that these young anti-workers forget all about this as they age and fall in line like the boomers and Generation Xers did, it does not seem like they will. A recent study found that millennials are not becoming more conservative with age. That has otherwise been a universal trend, right? Young people start out as lefties, but as they get older and richer, they move to the right politically. Well, that trend has stopped, at least in English-speaking countries, specifically the US and the UK. Arwa Madawi gave the best and shortest summation in The Guardian. Millennials have been royally screwed by an inequitable economic system and a runaway climate crisis. Only an idiot with loads of money would be happy with the way things are. One thing I'm not crazy about in anti-work is that it can make it look like all jobs are equally bad. And here's my problem with that. If you hate your job, but you believe that all other jobs are just as bad, then you are more likely to stick around in that bad job instead of fighting to improve conditions or looking for something better. But here's the thing, there are better jobs, better bosses, and better workplaces out there. They're not even that rare. Every country, every area has bad workplaces and good workplaces. At the very least, not all work is equally bad. Yes, there are bad bosses whose companies systematically exploit and mistreat their employees. But there are also companies that do their very best to be good workplaces. Are they perfect? No, but they're better. My worry is that some people will read the posts on anti-work and conclude that all work is equally bad. And if they do that, there is a real risk that they might just go on accepting bad work. If all jobs are bad, why look for a better one? Or if a person is looking for a new job, maybe they just accept whatever job they stumble on first instead of actively looking for a job they will like. Also, jobs are not going away, not soon, and maybe not ever. I mean, we can all strive for a future where work is no longer mandatory. I personally think it would be amazing if robots and artificial intelligences could do most of the work, and we all got a universal basic income. Maybe we'll achieve that post-scarcity, post-capitalist society where money becomes obsolete, kind of like in Star Trek. Or maybe we'll create a future where self-governing workers' collectives run their own companies and workers receive the surplus value of their own labor. And by the way, if you think this last one sounds completely unrealistic, I need to tell you about Mondragon, a workers' cooperative in Spain with 80,000 employees that has been around since the 1950s. This is absolutely doable even today. Now, each of those futures, or a combination of them, is entirely possible, but let me make 2 points about this. This might all be quite a ways off, and until it happens, most of us will still have jobs. And I would rather that we spend that time in jobs we like instead of jobs we hate. And second, even if we get one of those futures, there will still be work. People will still organize in groups to achieve common goals, and that will still require us to consciously create good working conditions. Even a workers' collective where no one is exploited financially could still be a terrible place to work if we don't make it a good one. So what do we do about all of this? Well, here's what we don't do. One of the most popular videos about anti-work on YouTube with over 200,000 views took a look at the movement and then made this suggestion for what you should do. See if you can spot the problem.
If you are deciding how to best manage your career, stop thinking of yourself as a worker and start thinking of yourself as a company. A company with a duty exclusively to your shareholders, which is just yourself and your family. So, what is the greatest entity in existence for extracting as much value possible out of something? A corporation, of course. They are unashamedly soulless, heartless machines made to maximize profit. Instead of hating them, it's much more productive to learn from them and to always think to yourself, what would I do if I was a company? And the product I was selling were the hours in my day.
Get that? He is basically saying that the solution to our current exploitative working conditions is to adopt a more corporate mindset to maximize your own benefit. And that's your personal benefit, mind you, you and your family. There is nothing in there about banding together with your coworkers to create better conditions for all. Essentially, his argument is this: companies are evil and soulless. You should be more like them. That has got to be one of the worst takes in the history of takes. That is exactly the kind of individualistic and overly simplistic thinking we need to get away from. That is exactly the kind of thinking that has allowed the current conditions to go unchallenged for way too long. And that is exactly what some people in the older generations at work have been doing, and why things are not getting better. So what can you do? I have some tips for you. 1, know your rights and stand up for them. Yes, the laws protecting workers may be weaker in America than in many other places, but they do exist. Managers are not allowed to steal your tips. Bosses can't just disregard you giving notice and wanting to quit, even if it is inconvenient for them. And yes, wage theft is illegal. Know your rights and stand up for them. 2, quit your job if you don't like it. The most foundational freedom a worker has is the freedom to walk away from a bad job. Use that freedom. 3, know that many of the things you rightly criticize are written into employment law in other countries, which means you can have them too. Vote for politicians who will protect workers' rights and not undermine them. 4, know that good jobs do exist. Do your best to figure out what a good job is for you and then go find that. 5, unite. It is so much easier to create change together than it is to do it alone. And yes, join a union if you can. And number 6, my final tip: if all else fails, come work in Denmark. We have record low unemployment and plenty of jobs for English speakers. We also have the lowest working hours and highest levels of worker happiness in the world. We'd love to have you. I have a whole nother video on why working in Denmark is better. And what should workplaces do? My main advice to bosses and HR people is this: you cannot afford to ignore what's going on with anti-work and the related groups. Make yourself a Reddit account and subscribe to these groups now. I'll put a list in the video description of my favorite subreddits. Then familiarize yourself with the complaints that workers have and take a good, long, hard look at your own workplace to see if it has any of the same issues. And if it does, stop doing that kind of thing to your people. Also, listen to your own employees. No workplace is perfect, but good workplaces make sure to find out what problems their employees have and do their best to fix them. Make sure that you have proven and safe ways for your employees to point out problems and that you don't shoot the messenger and punish people for speaking up. And this isn't just for American workplaces. Anti-work might be primarily American right now, but I promise you this is coming to the rest of the world soon. Here's what companies need to realize. This unprecedented rise of anti-work means that the younger generations in your workplaces have way less tolerance for mistreatment, unfairness, and exploitation. They are banding together now and reminding each other that they deserve good working conditions. And unlike previous generations, they are not going to grow out of it and fall in line. Your workplace must listen to them. It's either that or lose all of your employees under the age of 40. Thanks for watching. What do you think about the anti-work movement? Is this a group of passionate people airing legitimate complaints about work? Or is it a bunch of no-good commie snowflake slackers who need to stop whining and do what their bosses tell them? Leave a comment. And if you'd like to help me out, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And most of all, stay happy.